Hello and welcome back to the Darkcast. This is episode 2. This is Lucas.
This is Nick. Today we are going to be talking about something that is becoming more and more relevant in our society. We will be talking about quote unquote fake news, or as we will explain further, another term that we have for it. We also have a guest on who will introduce himself.
This is Fletcher. I am here to also talk about fake news.
All right, let's get into it then.
So, I think we should talk about first is the other term that we've come up with for what fake news is, um, which is really just narrative-based media and narrative-based news.
Yeah, and we were talking about it earlier. It's not necessarily news that is 100% factually wrong or misleading. It's just that uses a specific word choice to get their narrative across to the audience.
Hmm. Even the term fake news kind of could be considered under that because it's supposed to completely delegitimize anything that's said, but a lot of it is really more based on a political and economic agenda than anything else. Even if it's not completely false, it's
Yeah,
not.
we see a lot of it's either narrative based, so people just pushing their agenda, and nowadays it can be fake, but it doesn't have to be. Just the way they misconstrue things. Um, so I guess we can start by getting into exactly what we're talking about here. So we're gonna bring up an article here from Breitbart talking about Bill Maher saying it's possible horny Bill Clinton visited Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. So what this article really shows us, we can get into a little more. They go on to talk about what Bill Maher talked about and in his show, but it really shows us just how media uses their agenda to to push what they want people who are reading their articles to believe.
Yeah, I mean, even just reading that title, if you look at where they put the quotation marks and stuff like that, it's automatically you read the title, you know what they're trying or what they want to have people think.
Yeah, they're by putting the quotes around "it's possible" and "horny," what they're really implying is that Bill Maher is trying to say that it's not possible that Bill Clinton did it. I mean, they want people to believe that Bill Maher is pushing his agenda, that Bill Clinton didn't do this, or that it's fake news coming from the other direction.
Yeah, and it can be very hard to tell, what fake news is. We were reading other articles about how to spot fake news, and there's some characteristics that you can see, but fake news, I think, is a term that, like we said earlier, is uh, kind of misleading because, like Fletcher said, like you said, fake news could even be considered fake news because it's trying to delegitimize,
Mhm.
anything you disagree with, and it's we were actually talking about this earlier. It's like that, similar to the term conspiracy theorist. It's just an easy way to discredit somebody without actually
Hmm.
having to address any of the points that they make.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Like,
Everything is so based on like opinions and so based on how you spin something that if someone doesn't spin something the same way that you think about it, it's easy to just completely ignore what the actual reasons behind their point is.
Hmm.
absolutely.
I think one of the biggest issues we've got, with the internet and how we use it is people will find sources that they trust and then just go with that. They won't look into other sources. They don't read across the aisle. They they follow what they already know. Um, and that's what allows kind of narrative-based media to exist, where if people knew what was really going on and if people knew what the true story was, we could have narrative-based media, because people wouldn't believe it and they'd see just how constructed it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you know, the right-leaning news sources say the left-leaning news sources are fake news. The left-leaning news sources say the same thing about the right-leaning news sources. And I think ultimately it's just a way for the people to remain to keep the people docile, and not addressing the key issue that all news sources, whether they lean left, right, maybe even in the center, they all have an agenda, and that is to sell papers, sell online subscriptions, keep their ratings up, and the best way to do that is if they have their viewer base believing that the other side is an enemy, which is an extremely dangerous mindset to have, especially with what we've been seeing in the past 5 years with just how extreme both sides of the coin have become.
Yeah, especially with having a lot of the profits be click-based and a lot of the different titles for articles and videos and things like that. Just if you want to get someone's attention and you say something that is extreme and it lines up with their beliefs, they're a lot more likely to click on it. And if profit's the motivator for the media, even not looking at the political side of it, the economic side of it, the media is going to make more money off of angry people
Hmm.
that agree with what they say.
Yeah, and I think the media's especially been stirring people up for the past, uh, you know, probably 10 years at the earliest, and I think the problem lies in the fact that they're trying to stir the people up against each other, which really is what frightens me. We're not addressing the key issues. It's it's not the people versus the government or the people versus the institution. They're trying to keep it as the people versus the people,
Hmm.
which I do not think is a good way to address changes in policy, whatever they may be.
Definitely. And I think going back to what Fletcher was talking about with just how based on profit media has become, with the internet, everything is anyone can see what you're posting, and what gets clicks is what people agree with and what makes people angry. Um, there's a great CGP Grey video. Um, the title is "This Video Will Make You Angry," and it goes into just how anger helps ideas and things spread on the internet. And it's something that the media really uses. If they can use their narrative to make their viewers angry, they'll get more shares, they'll get more money, and it's a really big issue.
Yeah, you guys should be angry about this.
And yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of things I see as well, that the online, especially online media does is, I don't know if you guys have seen it. If they're trying to rile up the people against a politician, and I hate to say it, but for the past 5 years or so, it's mostly been Donald Trump. Um, they pick whether you agree with him or not, whether you agree with his ideas, they choose an imposing picture of him looking hostile. And they always know just what to say and to get the people going, subconsciously, so that they, before they even necessarily read the article or read the report on what they're talking about, they already got in their mind that, oh, Trump's doing something wrong now, or, this other politician's doing something wrong,
Hmm.
before you even read what the article's about.
And I think to really show off what we're talking about with that specifically, we could pull up another article here from the Washington Post. Title here is "Meryl Streep Was Right. Donald Trump Did Mock a Disabled Reporter." Um, so this is a very controversial topic, and a lot of people believe that this is actually something that happened. So what the Washington Post is really doing here is taking a clip of Donald Trump talking about a reporter who had lied, and he was talking about how he got caught in that and didn't know really how to respond. And in doing so, he motioned with his hands, and you can see how they take the screenshot specifically that makes it look like he's doing that. Um, they take the screenshot here where his hand is cocked in the position that is very similar to the disability that the reporter had. But you can go back to other rallies that Trump had held and see where he does movements very similar to this, from talking about people who are caught lying, who aren't disabled. And it really goes to show mocking a disabled reporter is not okay. And it it's definitely something that makes people angry, and it fits in with the narrative that Donald Trump is what they say he is. He's a terrible person. He's not to be trusted, and he's so bad he will mock a disabled reporter.
And honestly, even as someone who is not the biggest fan of Trump, there is the job of the media isn't to make money. Well, the job of the media is to make money. There's very little motivation of the media to be unbiased and to try to be actually helpful in giving the information to the people.
And
That's
the,
what it's
yeah,
supposed to do, but what it really does more than anything is try to play off of people's biases, and it ends up just furthering those biases, and it makes them money.
yeah, and that's like we said earlier. That's what sells the papers is keeping us docile and arguing with each other instead of the institutions. I mean, it, you know, like Fletcher said, whether you agree with Trump or whether you disagree with Trump, he's, and I can attest to this, he's not a Trump supporter. Um, I think the media will, they see that there's an opportunity with Trump
Mm.
at the base. He is a very controversial person. He has said some things that probably should be left unsaid, but the media sees it and
That's a good way to
they
put it.
see an opportunity to make money, and I think that's the problem with uh, this narrative-based media, is that they're always looking for the next Trump story. For
Hmm.
example, I was telling you guys actually about this earlier today. I saw this screen capture of Trump, on CNN, and they said that the headline on it was, Trump eats chicken from KFC on Air Force One, and under that, on the little scrolling text that goes underneath the headline, it says 30 dead in chemical attack in Syria or something along those lines. And I said, I mean, that's really what you're choosing to prioritize, is this man eating chicken on his own plane, versus these people who are being, having their rights taken away. And I think that's the main problem, is that, like I said a couple minutes ago, they're always looking for the next Trump story that'll get people going and that'll get people riled up.
It's all about making money with the media. I mean, if the I think what we covered last week in our podcast is one of the biggest stories of the century, and it's not really being covered.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't make as much money. I mean, it may make people angry, but Donald Trump makes people way angrier, and people are so much more likely to share something uh, that shows what they believe is correct and gets them angry. And
And just having his name on it makes them more likely to click on it.
yep,
Absolutely.
just
And
because of the whole narrative that the media has constructed around Donald Trump himself, they play into this just to make themselves money.
that's the ironic thing. It's almost like they want to capture Donald Trump doing, these atrocious things that we talked about last week. They want to catch him, proposing a concentration camp. They want to catch him, um, you know, talking about the violation of human rights, which, and it's ironic, like I said, that they're skipping over these violations of people's rights to look for the next Trump story. And although we talked about the the narrative-based media, but I'll ask you guys, what do you think would be an alternative to that? I mean, we on the other side we could have nationalized media, which is what has happened in fascist states and communist states, and
Yeah.
really just emboldened the party that was in power. And now we
Yep.
have the profit-based media, which has really just been deceiving people. So I'd ask, what's a good alternative?
Yeah. I mean, that's the $1 million question. How do you motivate people to actually be objective and humanitarian when the only real ways you have of doing media at the moment are either based on making money and playing off of people's biases, or being run by the government, which is very unlikely to be criticizing the government.
Yeah, I think especially if Trump controlled the media, I think you wouldn't see all these Trump stories.
No, you wouldn't. I mean, there are a lot of things that Donald Trump does that we need to know about, um, and there's a lot of things that even I disagree with that he does. Um, but what the media shows isn't the things that actually should be shown. They're the things that get people very angry. They appeal to this ethos that Donald Trump is such a terrible person without really covering what he does on a day-to-day basis, you know?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's opposed to Trump, most of my reasoning for being opposed to him is based on psychology, but from the little bits of looking at the media, I have almost no knowledge of what he's actually done as a president. I mean, other than very select things like his tax laws that got, I mean, attacked. There are very few things that he actually does that you hear about that aren't supposed to be based on his character. I mean, say what you will about his character. I personally am not the biggest fan, to put it lightly, but I would so much rather hear about what he does with and for the presidency and the country than what he does as a person.
Which a lot of it is not what you hear. Like you said, you'd rather see where he goes as a president, and a lot of times, it's easier to call him out on stuff people understand. Like, when he, for example, called Rosie O'Donnell a pig or whatever. It's much easier to say, oh, well, he's a bad person because he called her a pig, than he's a bad person because, his tax laws, really inhibit small businesses and embolden larger businesses. So it's easier to say, you know, what he says, although I will say a lot of what he says is not, he doesn't use very many big words, but that's irrelevant. I think um, people like to attack his character and not his policy, which is definitely what the media goes after.
Hmm.
And they do that with more than just Donald Trump. They do that with anybody who um, doesn't, their narrative doesn't fit into.
Yeah, I mean, something that I had seen from the right against Obama, which, to be fair, I'm also not the biggest fan of Obama, was that he was being attacked for putting Dijon mustard on a hot dog.
I mean, that's groundbreaking stuff right there.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean, front cover.
It's similar to how they attacked Trump for putting ketchup on his steak. It
Or
it
how
really
he drank
shows.
how he drank Diet Sprite at one of his State of the Union address or whatever it was.
Or how he fed, was it the football team that won from like Missouri a bunch of McDonald's food?
Oh yeah.
And I
Yep.
mean, they attacked him because you go to the White House and you get a bunch of McDonald's food, but I think what a lot of people don't understand is those football players probably really enjoyed that because that's something they probably haven't had.
Yeah,
I mean,
you gotta watch
McDonald's
your weight.
is not very healthy for you, but it is very delicious.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
tastes great.
I
Oh my
I
God.
love it. I mean, it does taste good, but it's not good for you. And that just shows like there, oh look, Donald Trump's a bad person because he gives them McDonald's. But that's not important. That's
No,
not what
it's
we need to hear about. We need to hear about his tax plan. We need to hear about exactly what he's doing in foreign policy. We need to hear more about what's happening with the wall. We need to hear more about what's happening with him pulling us out of the WHO and not funding that anymore. We need to
Paris
hear,
Accords.
yep, the Paris Accords. We need to hear more about that. We need to hear more about what he did with NAFTA. But that's not stuff that really the media covers. And even when they do cover that kind of stuff, it's not something that gets disseminated widely because
Mhm.
it doesn't get shared. They know, the media knows that. That's why the media only really puts out stuff that attacks people and gets their viewers angry.
and I would say it's they're almost handling the Trump situation like a tabloid. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, they're saying, you know, for example, you could see this like in the 90s when Hillary Clinton has ET baby or something like that, and now they're like Donald Trump puts ketchup on steak, and I mean they're not talking. You know, it's easier to have you know, they're treating him like a celebrity president, which is ironic because they're criticizing him for being you know, some
Yeah.
dumb celebrity who was on The Apprentice, and they're handling him like a celebrity. They're you know, attacking his personal flaws, you know, and instead of attacking his policy, which you know, whether you agree or disagree with Trump, I think everybody would appreciate a criticism or in you know, in certain cases either a criticism or a praise of his policy, which is strange because you can see both from the same exact policy from two different media sources.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big things with media that is a big issue today is that they do criticize or they do spin stuff in a positive light. Whereas I think what they need to do is just report what he's doing.
Mhm.
Don't tell us how his tax plan is terrible. Tell us what his tax plan is. Don't tell us that the wall is such a terrible idea and he's a bad person. Tell us what he's doing with it and tell us that. Tell us what he is doing. Don't spin it for people. I think people need to be informed and be able to make their own opinions about
Yes.
stuff. I mean, it's like the media thinks everyone in the country is stupid. They really do. That's why they just make us get angry. But what we need to do is we need to demand from our media. Tell us the facts. Tell us what is going on. Stop spinning your narrative.
And I think that connects back into the profit motive again really well because, I mean, if you're playing to a specific demographic and you're playing based on getting just views on what you put out to make money, then if you can already appeal to someone's previous bias, they are far more likely to look at it than if you just simply state something that they then have
Hmm.
to analyze themselves, especially if it's just view based and not like time spent reading the articles or anything like that. Like Nick, when you were asking earlier, I think a good possibility would be time spent reading articles, but again, that's just not very shareable. And I think that connects really well into a lot of the reasoning behind how the media has gotten so polarized, especially recently. I think social media plays a really, really big role in that.
And we like to cover social media, you know, as its own institution, you know, sometime in the future. But I will
Mhm.
say, social media I think has been, like Fletcher said, a huge downfall in the credibility of um, news sources and you know media as a news source. So
And even just belief in facts. I mean, if everybody has a platform, then everybody's opinions and everybody's um, all the information that's put out is it's just so hard to know what's credible and what isn't credible.
Hmm. So I'd like to pull up another article here from Business Insider. So
Mhm.
the title here, these 6 corporations control 90% of the media in America. So let's get into that. I mean,
I would
what
also
what
really quickly like to note how just even the phrasing in this article seems so different from the other articles we've looked at.
Hmm.
There's so much less bias laid over the top.
It's it's about the fact. There are 6 corporations that control 90% of the media. They're not telling you, they're not giving it a spin in that, because a lot of news will put spin into their title to get those clicks, but this article isn't doing that. It's really just stating a fact.
It's not these 6 evil corporations or anything
Right.
like
Or
that.
it's not, Trump owns a corporation. That's one of the 6 that control all
Mm.
media.
So I'm just gonna go back here a sec, because I had them pulled up. So those 6 media conglomerates: GE, Comcast, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner. I mean, these are all, people know these companies, but I bet most people wouldn't know that Comcast owns NBC, wouldn't know that Disney owns ABC, ESPN.
Disney also owns Fox News.
News Corp owns Fox News.
No, Disney owns Fox News.
This is maybe a little outdated.
Yeah, by 20, yeah.
This is by
I know,
2011.
So there's an updated list. Disney
But the point
owns
is
Fox.
not exactly who owns
Right, yeah.
what news media. The point is that 90% of our media is controlled by 6 sources. Is that really the kind of country that we want to live in, where 6 sources can determine what
The narrative.
350 million people here?
Yeah. What really scares me is seeing companies like Disney and Time Warner, because I mean those aren't specifically news media companies. They're entertainment media companies. Their entire setup is to make money off of getting people to view their material.
Exactly. And another thing you see is, especially in biased media, for example, you see reporters who, maybe align. And I don't think I think if I could give advice, it's, find reporters that you like. Like, for example, I think reading one news source religiously is like voting based on party instead of the candidate. I think if you find a good reporter, because you're gonna have good reporters and bad reporters no matter where, and a lot of reporters actually will write from multiple sources. But
Mm-hmm.
where I was going with this is, you see right-leaning reporters, for example, will give Trump a lowball question, and then they'll throw a ridiculously hard question that, no matter how a left-leaning person answered it, they would come off as bad. And left-leaning reporters do the same for the right. That's another problem I have is, especially with, did you guys watch the Democratic debates?
Not a lot. I've seen some.
Yeah. They would ask, for example, some of the more mainstream candidates like Joe Biden, or at the time Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. They'd ask them, for example, if you were president, what would be if you could accomplish one thing in your presidency, what would you do? Of course, Joe Biden said defeat Trump, which we won't talk about. But then they'd ask, some of the more fringe candidates like Tulsi Gabbard, or who are the couple other ones?
Andrew Yang,
Andrew Yang,
Mm.
absolutely.
Pete
Pete
Buttigieg.
Buttigieg, yeah.
They'd ask them these ridiculously hard questions. Like, I don't remember any of them. It was the debates were months ago, but and that's what scares me, is just there's no standard for the questions they ask at the debate. They don't they don't ask everybody the same question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to even with 2016. I think it was a debate hosted by CNN where they leaked the questions to Hillary Clinton before, which,
And didn't give it to Bernie.
yeah, and because they wanted Hillary to win, and it really shows they push their narrative, and the media definitely has, like, they have a role to play in our politics with what they want, And I mean, as Americans, we should be concerned about that because 90% of our media is owned by 6 big corporations. So what these big 6 corporations are pushing, how do we know that's what's going to be best for America? How do we know that it's not just the 1% pushing their agenda on us? I mean, that's one of the biggest questions is, can we trust the media? And I don't really think we can. I think we act, as Americans, we have a duty to make sure that we stay informed, but make sure that we read sources from both the left and the right to make sure that we're not in an echo chamber. We're not just reading one thing after another from one side that's just polarizing us. I think we really need to realize that we have more in common as Americans than we do have in common with the people who run our media.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you get into an argument with someone on social media, more likely than not, you're going to have more in common with that person than the people who are actually having their interests represented. Especially like with this being an election year, the influence that the media has on elections is just massive. I mean, it's literally the information that is available about the candidates who will be running the entire country. And that
Mm-hmm.
information is controlled by 6 corporations, like you said.
90% of it, yeah.
90%, yeah.
So it's really those 6 corporations that are pushing their narratives, trying to just swing voters for what they want.
And not to be too conspiratorial, but they're pushing their candidates.
Oh, we like
Absolutely.
conspiracies
Oh,
here.
love conspiracy, but
I mean, I think conspiracies get a bad rap, um, and they're oftentimes shut down because, oh, you're just being a conspiracy theorist. That the government would never do that,
Oh, the
or
government would never do that. My
or
favorite argument ever.
or things like that. I mean,
It's just what, whether you agree with the conspiracy theory or not, it's one of those things you have to handle delicately. And I would say most people don't. It's just an easy way to discount whoever you're talking to without actually having to talk to them about the argument that they're making. And I mean, there's always gonna be people you can't argue with. There's always gonna be people that are just gonna talk and talk and talk without really saying anything. But I mean, for the most case, a lot of conspiracy theories at least hold some evidence. I mean, we could talk about the ones that don't, like Pizzagate. Um, but I think, like Lucas said, conspiracy theorists are just shut down.
hmm
Which,
and especially in modern day and age with the media pushing their narrative, if there's a conspiracy they don't want out there, they will do everything they can to make sure that people don't believe it.
and that's what's really strange to me is that, I mean, a lot of things are shut down as conspiracy theories, but if you look at what the larger media companies tend to focus on, a lot of the stuff that they talk about are, by definition, conspiracy theories.
hmm
But if a conspiracy theory aligns with the narrative, that's when it gets the attention of the larger media companies, and that's when it actually goes viral, I guess.
Yeah.
But
And
any type of conspiracy that opposes their views instantly is discredited by the single word conspiracy.
well, have you guys seen a large conspiracy, with the exception of the one we are going to talk about in a few minutes, take off in the past 10, 15 years?
Bush did 9/11.
Okay. I mean,
Other than that, I mean,
Yeah.
the
and
media
that's
still hides that, though. I mean,
exactly.
they're never going to talk about
I
the
mean,
idea of that happening.
Yeah.
that's not something they want out there. I mean, you'd think if if he did that, especially the left-leaning media would definitely want to get that out there, but they don't. And I mean, that just it,
It connects a lot with a lot of science, actually. A lot of things in science, if it goes against the main narrative of how things are supposed to work, then it instantly gets discredited without really much attention to it and actually trying to disprove it with evidence. It gets disproven with um, it's just automatically disproven with credibility.
Hmm.
I mean, you don't align with the main idea of what most people believe, so instantly, no matter what evidence you have, it's just it's not even allowed to be considered.
And in a couple hundred years, however unlikely some of the things people are talking about, like flat Earth,
Mm.
you know, um, on a very small chance that that turned out to be true. I mean, there are things where very few people in history have believed it. For example, heliocentrism replacing geocentrism. I mean, or Galileo's, and a lot of his ideas, it was a couple of people who believed in that. And I guess you could even say Nicholas Copernicus was a conspiracy theorist because he believed that the or I guess not really a conspiracy theorist, but a fringe thinker. He believed that the Earth was not the center of the universe. And in a couple hundred years, they might say, well, a lot of these people just discounted these theories because they questioned the status quo,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is not it's not healthy for free thinking.
No.
No,
Everybody
it's
loves to
definitely
believe what they think is right, but nobody loves to think that what they think could be wrong.
not. I think that's one of the fundamental human flaws is people hold their people think that their being, their consciousness couldn't be deceiving them in any way, and what they know to be true couldn't possibly not be true. And it just goes to show that that's why people believed the earth was flat for so long.
Yeah.
That's why people believed in so many crazy things. That's why, and I mean, it's something that what do you do about that? What do you do about the fact that people don't want to change their opinions because they believe they are the right, and there's no way they could be wrong.
Yeah, it's very hard for people to admit that they're wrong. I mean, I think everybody here, you've done better. You met us a few years ago, maybe not so much, but um,
Yeah.
I think there's no shame in admitting that you were wrong about something. That you maybe had a belief that was not necessarily what you believe now. There's nothing wrong with that. People.
I think that's almost I think that's definitely a good thing. I
I
mean,
would
it
agree.
shows
Oh
that
yeah.
you are more interested in what's actually true than in what you believe, which to me is just one of the best ways of thinking that there is. And I mean, this has definitely gone a little more in the philosophical direction than where we started, but it's a really important part of the whole um, constructed narrative and fake news topic because it plays directly on that part of humanity, and it literally just makes companies money and pushes a political agenda off of that way of thinking that is just so common and programmed in
Yeah. Because people
by
don't want to
biology.
change their opinions, they're less likely to click on an article that disagrees with their opinions.
Yeah.
So so they do just get stuck in this loop of yeah, I mean, like I said before, they basically get stuck in an echo chamber where they only it's like confirmation bias. They only take in information that confirms what they already knew, which is the opposite of what the scientific method tells us to do. In the scientific method, you don't try to prove yourself right, you try to prove yourself wrong.
Hmm.
That's how you know you are right.
Yeah.
If you can't prove yourself, can't prove that you're wrong, you've done pretty well in your original theory.
Yep.
But I mean, like it's like scientists say, some of them say, scientific advancement in either direction, whether you're right or you're wrong, is still advancement.
Yeah.
And furthering yourself as a person, I think can go from reinforcing your beliefs in a healthy manner, or realizing that you made a mistake, and you may not have believed the right thing that in your mind, and changing that belief. I think either is healthy development for a person.
Well,
Mhm.
and not to get even more philosophical, but it's like people are more concerned about being right in the past than they are about being right in the present. So even if some
Mm.
evidence goes against what they used to believe, or I guess what they still believe, they are more concerned with not having to change their belief from what they used to believe than they are about actually being right. They're more concerned about having been right than actually believing the right thing.
It's about protecting ego.
Exactly.
Human ego is something that has come in handy for a long time, but in the modern age, it really can hurt us when trying to know what's true. So I think we've kind of talked about this for a bit, and I wanted to direct us back towards talking about modern conspiracies. Like Nick said, we were going to cover one that really shows just how the media pushes their narrative. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull up an article here. Now this conspiracy is something that's very disputed, and
Mhm.
not a lot of people know about what it is, and it's so complicated, and it involves so many things like the FISA courts, and most people don't even know what FISA courts are. Um, so Obamagate was the worst crime ever committed, and here's what it is the title of this Washington Post article.
And that title alone just shows that they're very dismissive about the concept of Obama, committing
So
these
let's just talk for
allegations.
a minute. I'll talk about, I don't want to get into too much of what Obamagate is. We're going to be covering Obamagate in an episode in the future, and we're going to dedicate a full episode to it.
Yeah, that definitely
Um,
merits a full episode because I don't know much about it. And I mean, personally, I have come from the side of not believing it too strongly, but I have seen so little evidence for or against it that, I
yeah,
mean, it's like something like this has no evidence in it
and
whatsoever
we'll get into this
to
this
prove
article.
or disprove
If you
it.
could even call it an article,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the
it's
basic premise behind Obamagate is that the Obama administration abused the FISA courts to get a warrant to spy on the Trump campaign. Whether you believe this conspiracy or not, and I've seen a lot of good evidence, and we're going to talk about it in the future as to why we believe that it is true.
Mhm.
Let's get into what this article says. What is the crime exactly that you're accusing him of? You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious. All you have to do is read the newspapers, except yours. President Trump responding to the Washington Post reporter Philip Rucker. Obamagate began long ago, long before Trump even got elected, before he knew he was running. It began before America, before time, in the early days when President Barack Obama lit the furnace of the sun, just before he fixed the paths of the planets in such a way that millennia in the future, Donald Trump would stare directly into a solar eclipse. And of course, everyone knew about it. Um, so I mean, right off this first paragraph, they're not they're not talking about what Obamagate actually is. They're not even giving it any sort of credit at all. I mean, I think we owe it to conspiracies to, because they do sometimes end up being true. And we,
Look at MK Ultra.
yeah, I mean, look at MK Ultra. Look at all the other stuff the CIA has done. Look at the Tuskegee Airmen who were infected with syphilis.
yeah, there's a lot that we should probably dedicate a whole episode to.
So,
But
Previous conspiracy
oh
theories
yeah,
prove it, right?
we'll
and
talk about
even
that more. Yeah.
even look at the Washington Post. I mean, they had some of the original conspiracy theorists, Woodward and Bernstein, discovering Watergate.
hmm And in this first article, they don't even start to mention what the conspiracy says. They're just attacking it for being a conspiracy. You know, it's like, oh, it's something terrible. It's something that they make it crazy, like Obama lighting the furnace of the sun. They're joking around with it because they don't want people to even consider it.
And of course, satire has its place. I mean, everybody loves comedy,
Yeah.
especially probably the three of us. But
And
I mean, there's very little. I mean, at least with something like this, you would expect some, not necessarily a disclaimer, but some form of stating that this isn't news. I mean, this is the Washington Post. Yes, it says opinion on it, but there's a difference between opinion and literally not a single piece of any type of evidence or even talking about what the issue is. I mean,
Hmm.
this is from the Washington Post, and
yeah,
there is not one single thing
I mean, we
about
can
what
see
it's supposed to
there,
be.
right under the Washington Post, it says democracy dies in darkness. And
Yeah.
in this article of what could be one of the biggest conspiracies of the century, they're not even covering what it is. They don't even present evidence against it.
They
I
don't
mean,
bring anything to light.
they don't bring anything to light with what this is. At least if it's not true, can you give us the reasons it's not? No, they go on to say Obamagate was the biggest political crime in American history by far, a fact that Barack Obama did not hesitate to tell Richard Nixon, causing him to shed bitter tears in an as yet unreleased tape. I mean,
and look at the last sentence of this paragraph. It went all the way to the top, where Obama floated inside a sinister Masonic eye at the apex of a pyramid. I mean, they're just making fun of people who believe in these, conspiracy theories, and just downright insulting them. I mean,
And not even just insulting, but they're completely discrediting them. I mean, anything that goes against the main narrative is talked about like this. There's no use of evidence to disprove it. It's just completely dismissed.
hmm yeah, I mean, we would think that when your slogan is democracy dies in darkness, you'd want to shed light on the truth instead of just dismissing what could potentially be true. Even if it's not, you need to show us that it's not true. You can't just push your narrative that there's no way it could possibly be true, and if you think that, you're thinking Obama's floating in some sort of eye in a pyramid on the back of a dollar bill. I mean,
There's no way the Earth could possibly be round. Are you kidding me? Look, it looks flat.
yeah, exactly. How
looks quite flat to me.
every like picture I've ever seen, I don't see any curve of the Earth. What are you talking about? I mean, that's what people said until we had pictures from space.
Yeah.
You know, people are like, "Oh, we can go way up to the top of a mountain." Yeah, it looks pretty flat to me, other than the mountains. I don't see any curve there.
And to be a devil's advocate, I mean, a lot of conspiracy theories, it's almost impossible to disprove because
Hmm
they can be just any disproving evidence can be included within the conspiracy.
It's a cover up.
A cover up, exactly. But at the same time, this isn't necessarily the type of conspiracy that flat Earth is. I mean, it's very different to completely dispute scientific evidence versus to bring up potential evidence of a massive crime. I mean, there are so many different conspiracies that are hard to believe, like to mention again MK Ultra. I think you did an overview of it a little bit in your last video, but
I
basically
don't
like
think we did.
No, we didn't
no,
actually. If you want to explain it, go for it.
you know more about it than I do.
I do know a lot. It's, I'm sure some of you, some people know it's uh, this 20-year program that the CIA did where they were trying to mind control people. And there were other, they had 7 different subdivisions that went on for, like I said, 20 years. There's a great resource if you do want to know more, theblackvault.com, where he has this one guy, I think his name is John Greenwald, and he basically used probably one of the few good things the government's done, which would be the Freedom of Information Act. And he obtained all these papers that the CIA wrote, about they essentially, for example, once they put LSD in ice cream and gave it to people on the beach and to see if LSD could influence people. I mean, this happened. We know this happened, and we know that they have done similar experiments, like we talked about earlier, poisoning Tuskegee men with syphilis. When there was a treatment, I'd
Yeah.
add, just to see what would happen. They didn't treat them. They just wanted to see what would happen. So, you know,
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
hard to put anything past. There's a very big difference between political conspiracies and conspiracies like flat Earth, and it's just it's hard to dismiss things that the government is capable of, and it's hard to dismiss things that people are capable of. I
mhm.
mean, it's easy to just say no, that would never happen, but it's a harder to say why and how.
it is. I mean, and I think like we talked about earlier, you know, these aren't necessarily conspiracy theories anymore. These are like MK Ultra's not a conspiracy theory anymore. It's a fact that, you know, the CIA really did this, that they gave people LSD to see what would happen if they could mind control them. They had plans to attack American citizens and blame it on Cuba so that we could go to war in the 60s. I mean, like I said, these aren't conspiracy theories anymore because we know that it happened. And, you know, it might seem like a lot of this stuff might seem like a fringe theory right now, but, you know, in a
I
few
think
years.
MK Ultra didn't at the time. Oh my
Oh my,
God.
yeah,
Yeah,
imagine coming out and saying the CIA is poisoning people to try and mind control them.
with LSD.
With L, yeah,
In the ice cream.
I mean, that just sounds a little ridiculous, but hey, turned out to be true.
and even other facts that aren't even conspiracies that just sound ridiculous if you give a spin on them. Like, hey, I wonder if we take some mold and try and, you know, use it as antibiotics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm feeling
Seriously.
pretty sick, so let me just eat some mold, see if I get better. Um, but going back to like what we're talking about with the media here, it's a lot of people would read the article about Obamagate and be like, "Yeah, that's the craziest thing I've ever happened. Ha ha ha, that's not real." But
Yeah, the government would
but
never
they
do that.
wouldn't actually look into it, you know? And I think that's something that we as Americans have to do. We need to make sure that we are up to date on what's going on. We can't just believe what these six media sources want us to believe.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
think it's actually our duty to question things and resist what, you know, what we're being told. I think that's what makes America's, you know, we the people have a resistance to institutions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The people control the institutions, not the other way
Hmm.
around. But unfortunately, with the media, it just doesn't seem to work that
I
way.
mean, yeah,
yeah,
past 50 years that might have even flopped.
the media push these six sources. They push their narrative. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that for 90% of the news that's put out comes from six sources. Six sources. I mean, and they're all multi-billion dollar companies. How are we supposed to trust six multi-billion dollar corporations? How do we know that they want what's best for America? How do we know that they're not going to lie to us? I mean, a lot of what people don't like is like we hear with Bernie Sanders and what AOC talks about how the rich have too much power and whatnot, but then people get all their information from the rich,
Yeah.
from these six powerful corporations. It's basically just controlling.
And another freaky thing to think about is, as of right now, like we said earlier, the Disney Corporation, owns Fox and ABC, and I think they also own Vice. Um, which Fox and ABC both skew completely different ways. So, you know, they're feeding people two different narratives that are coming from the same company.
They're driving a wedge right down the middle.
Yeah, and you know, it's
It's if we keep Americans divided, then they won't realize that what they need to do is unite and fight back against this media, narrative based media, is what Americans really need to do. Stop believing narrative based media. Stop consuming narrative based media.
I mean, we the people just need to demand better from honestly what is in considered by a lot of people to be the fourth estate. I mean, it it kind of has to be separate from the government, but it's not separate. It's such a involved, interconnected thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was also reading something a little while ago that said some media sources are even funded by some of the parties, like the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. I think it's one of the it's either Vox or Vice. I cannot remember, so don't quote me on this. But they received uh, a substantial amount of funding from uh, the government. I think it was some people in the Democratic Party. So it's I mean, you can say, oh, it's just some people funding a news source, but yeah, I mean, that's the first step to having a nationalized media. In which case, we never hear about, um, this strange article that we read saying Obamagate was the worst crime ever committed. And
Mm-hmm.
here's what it is. That's kind of a shabby article, but it's
To
not the
say the
worst.
least.
It's not the worst we could have. The worst we could have is not hearing about Obamagate. I'd rather have somebody criticizing it. And honestly, I can say this. I'd rather have some, some opinion article criticizing the idea of Obamagate than have no mention of Obamagate. Have the
Mm-hmm.
government, cover it up.
Yeah. And to
And
bring it another step, I'd rather see an article other than this one. I'd rather see an article that uses evidence to try to disprove it than to just try to dismiss it.
yeah, I mean that would ultimately be a better solution. But I don't think anything could be worse than a
Mm,
truly
yeah,
nationalized media.
nationalized media would be truly a terrible thing. I mean, that's the last step in a government takeover.
Yeah, we
So,
we saw it in we did talk briefly about George Orwell's 1984 on the last episode, and that's another thing that happened in his book. The media was controlled by the party, and they essentially, if you don't want to talk about you know, the things that they did in that book, I would recommend everybody reads that.
oh yeah.
I plan on it.
Um, but for one example, you know, they the party was reducing the chocolate rations that were going out to the people. Uh, I can't remember if it was weekly or monthly or
I think it was
I think
monthly.
I think so. And they were reducing it from 30 grams a month to 20 grams a month. However, they had the media go and rewrite the headlines to say that they were increasing the chocolate rations from 10 grams to 20 grams. So it's with a nationalized media like that, you never know what the truth is. And I doubt there were people who were measuring in grams how much they were getting a week.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
think I would really like to kind of get into talking about what we think would be a better system than what we've got. Maybe some
Absolutely.
potential solutions. And one thing I wanted to just talk about real quick is we don't do we want 90% of our media owned by six corporations? I mean, or should we introduce bills, antitrust bills for media? I
Oh,
mean, one thing I
absolutely.
was thinking about is it's far too easy for one big company to just buy up a bunch of small media corporations. And I mean, one thing we could mandate, and I'm not sure we'd have to talk about this more, but if you put a mandate that media companies like one source can't own more than like a couple media companies, so that way one source can never buy up so much and then control the narrative, or
Yeah.
something like you, you can't you have to, I don't know, something like that where you wouldn't be able to get a monopoly on the media.
And I think it might even be necessary. I'm a libertarian. Um,
Big time.
I think that's the way to go. But I think the media, in the sense of the Constitution, might even have to become its own entity with
Yeah.
that has rights similar to the people, that cannot be infringed. And I mean, this is all my idea. I don't, it's hard to conceptualize, especially in our nation, an entity that is not controlled by the government and then that's not for profit.
Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
very difficult to think of a solution, but I think
Well, and just to give it one small concrete step, just taking advertisement out of news. I mean, if a lot of the profit is based on views instead of based on, well, if a lot of the profit is based on just simply having your article clicked on, then advertisements are a massive driving force behind that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what clickbait is. I mean, that's how they get their money. Is you don't have to read the article. All you have to see is
Obamagate was the worst crime ever committed, and
Yeah.
here's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
So,
if you don't know how the Washington Post, for example, is going to skew that, you could actually think this is a legitimate article. You could actually think that they're exposing, this potential conspiracy.
You could look at that as clickbait from either side, yeah.
oh yeah. So, all these things, I mean, I don't think we know the answer, and I don't like the idea of regulating the media using the government, but something's got to happen. I mean, what we've got now certainly isn't working.
No.
So,
And it's easy to say people just need to be better, but there's very big difference between idealism and being actually practical about
Yeah.
how you change it.
I think implementing a system where you can account for the people's, or entities, I should say, in the case of the media, implement a system where you can account for their lack of, their fallings, their shortcomings. Yeah, that'll be the best way. And like I said, I don't have the answer. I wish I did, but I don't have the answer.
I think one good step would be more independent fact-checking sources like Snopes, but I don't want that run by the government. I want more companies to start up that do fact-checking like that. I think would be a good idea.
Yeah.
And then you can go to them and see, oh, these people say it's right, these people say it's wrong, and then you can kind of get more information that way, and that would just help filter through some of this narrative-based media.
There almost needs to be a complete separation between news and opinion news.
Yeah, I don't think having Obamagate, like for example, if you go to the WashingtonPost.com and type in their search bar, Obamagate, and they have a serious article, if they do have one, outlining for example, the timeline right next to this strange article that we just talked about that is essentially criticizing anybody who has the idea that Obama might have spied on the Trump campaign.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, it's even like criticizing anyone who believes in the possibility of Obamagate. It's not just criticizing Obamagate, but it's directly criticizing people for believing in the potential of it.
Yeah.
Which I think is a frightening thought, and how we become a nation that's not only controlled by a malevolent government, but a nation that's controlled by a malevolent media.
Controlled by the ruling class.
Yeah.
I think Americans need to realize that we have more in common with each other than with the ruling class. We need to stand up for ourselves.
Like you said earlier, we need to be able to shake hands with people we might not agree with politically at the end of the day. Say, I'm
Yeah.
still American, you're still American at the end of the day.
And we both want what's best for ourselves, our country, and our children.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And even though we disagree on how to get there, we need to realize that we both want to get there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We all want to get to a good system where it works for everyone. And the only way we're going to do that is by having more discussions. And with the way the narrative-based media just makes people angrier and angrier, people don't want to do that anymore. And
No.
and that means they're winning. If they keep Americans from talking, then they can control the narrative, and they can control us.
Exactly. They just feed people's egos until they're so inflated that they're unwilling to have a conversation with someone who disagrees with them on anything.
I see it more and more. I used to see back when I had social media, if you don't agree with me on on this, you're still you're still my friend. We don't have to unfriend each other. But now I see, if we disagree on this, unfriend me, or unfollow me, or whatever format you're using, and that's not the way to go. The way and I think a lot of times people try and justify it, say, well, this is this is a basic human right. If you don't agree with this, then unfriend me. And I can understand that more, but I still don't think that's the way to go. I don't think blocking discussion is going to help anybody in the long run.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the core principle of the First Amendment is freedom of speech, and our founders knew that to be in a country with free speech was to be in a country where we talked and discussed what would be best for our country.
If only a few people who are in charge, if only their narratives and opinions are the ones that are considered, then that's how you get to things like, I mean, where we're at more or less now. Especially with a two-party system, things just get so polarized and split against each other
And
when
that's
we're
what
supposed to work together.
that's what this big media complex wants. They want the people to fight each other. They want people to not question them or the government. They want us to, they want Republicans to hate the Democrats. They want Democrats to hate the Republicans. They want to keep it that way because that's how they keep the Democrats and the Republicans in power.
Yep.
I mean, how often do you hear things like a vote for a third party is a vote for the other party?
Yeah.
Yep. Don't waste your vote. That's what I hear. Don't waste it. I think if you vote or you don't vote, I don't know how you can really waste a vote. That makes very little sense to me.
The one that really scares me is don't think about how bad our candidate is as long as their candidate is worse.
Yeah. I don't care who the for example, I don't care who the Republican candidate is. I'm voting for Republican. Or I'm voting Democrat. That's another thing that scares me is, I'm not voting, Biden. I'm not voting Trump. I'm voting by the party. I think,
And in America today, it seems most people aren't even voting for somebody. They're voting against the other
yes.
person.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. They're voting.
I'm not voting for Trump.
I love
Oh,
that. That's
I'm
a
not
great way of
voting for
putting it.
Biden. That's what I hear.
Yeah.
Who are you voting for? I'm sure ain't voting for Trump.
Yeah, I'll tell
Who
you
are
what
you
I'm not
voting
voting
for? I'm
for.
sure ain't voting for Biden.
Yeah.
So,
All
food
right.
for thought.
It's something.
Absolutely.
I
Something
mean,
to fall asleep to. I think.
yeah, we'll see what goes on. We're marching closer to November 3rd every day. We'll see what goes on with the media. We'll see. Um,
See
so
what
yeah.
gets focused.
Yeah, we'll see. See what happens. I think the government just showed up with my new cement boots. Bury me at the bottom of the.
Hey, at least you made it through another week without China arresting you.
That's true.
That's true.
We don't want China arresting us. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah. If you
Appreciate
enjoyed listening to the podcast today, consider subscribing. Please like the video. Share it if you think there's anybody who could need to listen to something like this.
Yeah, any voice that we can get and people listening to us, just listening to us, it's greatly appreciated.
If you want to stay up to date on our notifications, hit the bell icon and make sure you select all notifications. I mean, YouTube algorithm likes to silence things that maybe they don't agree with. So,
Yeah, like the corporate stuff.
from us here at the Darkcast, thanks for listening and have a great week.